I don't know about you, Ty, but when I was looking at my rankings this week, there are some ugly matchups, some running back starts that I think we're going to have to make that I don't want to. But that's why we're talking about the best and the worst matchups for week 3. Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Like I said before, I am Cameron Lawrence, and I am joined by my esteemed, my wonderful, my amazing, my football genius colleague, Mr. Tyler Plath, throwing the Pit Vipers on like we saw last week. Ty, it is interesting to see you again. Not all, looking all swaggy over here. How are you doing today, Ty?
Oh, I'm good. I'm ready to repeat as undefeated in the takes department. No, I'm obviously kidding. I'm doing good though. I'm ready to talk these matchups because, like you said at the beginning, there are some that are really, really, really nice. There are some that are really, really, really ugly. So hopefully we break it down the best we can, and I know that we can. So let's do it.
For sure. Alrighty. Well, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the pod, turn on notifications. If you're listening to the audio podcast, subscribe on there. And hey, if you want to leave us a little review, because me and Ty are so good at what we do. I'm just kidding.
We need the confidence boost because we're missing our leader. So
yes, Lucas, our host isn't here. Just leave us a review just to tell Lucas that he's not needed. Okay, that's all we want you to do. But like I said before, we are breaking down the best and the worst matchups of week 3. So let's not waste any more time and get into it. So usually I'm the one that kicks us off of our matchups, but Ty, I'm going to actually throw it to you and start with your running back matchup this week. Ty, who do you like? Whose backfield are you favoring this week?
I like the Seahawks backfield, and I think it's been a bit of a bumpy takeoff for the Seahawks so far this year. You get throttled by the Rams in week 1, then you go into OT and a shootout against the Lions and you win. And specifically when it comes to the run game, it's been pretty dicey. It doesn't help when you don't have your 2 starting tackles, and then your interior offensive line hasn't necessarily been the best. But I think this is the week where we can expect a monster. I shouldn't say monster because I always feel weird trying to predict the monster week for players because like it's just not going to happen once you speak it into existence. So I favor the Seahawks running backs this week against the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are currently allowing the 8th most rushing yards per game and the 3rd most fantasy points on average to running backs. And as I mentioned before, week 1 for the Seahawks, and you look at Kenneth Walker, 12 attempts for 63 yards. That's over 5 yards a carry, which is great. Only problem, though, is that they were playing from behind, so the rushing attempts were not there then for Kenneth Walker. Week 2, they were there, except you went up against a better run defense or in Detroit, where you're only putting up 2-point-something yards per carry. Again, this week against Carolina, I rate Carolina's run defense on the same plane as the Rams' run defense. I like the matchup. I think Kenneth Walker, especially right when Nick Chubb is gone for the season now, Saquon Barkley is out for at least 1 week. There's another running back.
Eckler didn't practice today.
Eckler didn't practice today. Like when you're missing like 3 of the top 5, top 10 running backs, I think it's a way easy argument to be like, oh yeah, Kenneth Walker has top 5 upside this week. But like, I would even argue like if those 3 were healthy and playing, I would still argue that Kenneth Walker has that same kind of upside just because of the matchup itself. So don't be scared off by Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet is battling DJ Dallas right now for the running. I shouldn't say running back 2 spot, but I said it in a TikTok. It's a 60-40 split, and Charbonnet is currently splitting with DJ Dallas on the 40%. So it's a 60-20-20. So this backfield is all Kenneth Walker. I would start him with a ton of confidence this week because the matchup is phenomenal.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we saw how good Kenneth Walker was last year. The reason we were out is because we expected Zach Charbonnet to have more of a role, and I still wouldn't be surprised if towards the end of the year, especially getting closer to playoff time, he does begin to have more of a role. But at this time, there's no evidence to support that. There's no reason to be out on Kenneth Walker and in a juicy matchup. Yeah, I'm gonna bank on him. Really putting a good game forward for his first one of the year. And speaking of a running back who needs to put a good game forward, one of our buy lows of the week that I just talked about yesterday in our video is Josh Jacobs and the Raiders against the Steelers. And if there's any team to bounce back against after a negative 2-yard showing, it is these Steelers. They are allowing 386 yards on 69 attempts. Nice. For 5.6 yards per carry. They are getting absolutely shredded on the ground. Now, I understand they played CMC. They played Nick Chubb for a half before he went down. That was, I do got to stop and say, we just got to acknowledge like that was a devastating injury. It's just like it ruined my entire Monday night watching that happen. He is one of those guys that you want to root for, and it's so much fun to root for. And watching something like that happen was just awful.
Yeah, Godspeed to Nick Chubb.
Yes.
Hopefully that recovery, I know it's going to be a long road, but hopefully he comes back better from it because the NFL is better when he's playing in it.
For sure. And getting back to Jacobs, though, he has averaged 1.6 yards per carry. The only running back with over 20 carries who has averaged less yards per carry than him is Cam Akers. So he needs a get-right game. And on top of the Steelers' defense being bad, this offense is not much better. Did you know, Ty, the Steelers' offense didn't take a single snap inside the Browns' 30-yard line on Monday night? Yes. That's how bad they were. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities to run the ball in this game, and I think Josh Jacobs really gets going. And if you saw the YouTube video I put out or the short or TikTok that Lucas put out, Josh Jacobs' next 7 games, 8 out of his next 9 are really juicy matchups, and I think this is going to be the beginning of him getting going. Anything to add on Josh Jacobs today?
I heard this stat earlier today. The final score of the Steelers-Browns game was 26-22. The offense scored 12 points. The defense scored 14 points. That's how bad this Steelers offense is. So if there's a game where Vegas can really control how the game is going and stuff, it's this one.
For sure. Alrighty, Ty, let's transition to the wide receivers. Who are the must-start wide receivers for week 3?
I keep picking on these guys. And when I say these guys, I keep picking on the Vikings secondary because it is just ruthless. Ruthless. Chargers wide receivers, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Okay, you're starting them already. Oh, man, this is too good of a matchup. It's too good of a matchup, okay? And this is, I'll just kind of throw in all Chargers players. Austin Eckler, if he's healthy. Josh Kelly, if Austin Eckler isn't healthy. Gerald Everett. Sneaky little streaming option, I think, just because I am expecting fireworks in this game. I'm expecting all offense, no defense. To the point where like Keenan Allen is going to have like 8 receptions, 10 targets for 100 and a tutty. The Mike Williams is going to go for like 6 on 8 targets for 120 and 2 touchdowns just because he's going to be downfield so much. This Chargers offense is going to have a day against the Vikings defense, especially when their play caller, who is Kellen Moore, just demolished the Vikings last year as the Cowboys offensive coordinator 40-3. And I know that Brian Flores is in now, so it's not Ed Donatel that Kellen Moore is going up against. It's kind of the same players, though. I mean, I just think this game is going to be such a high-scoring game. The Vikings are going to be in the losing side of it because that's just the pessimistic. We know how these games go. Okay? The Chargers are going to just dominate all day long. I know the Vikings are going to put up points, too, because their offense is just designed to. But Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, both solid wide receiver twos. Keenan Allen so far this year has been performing like a wide receiver one. You can expect those kind of numbers again this week.
Yeah, I'm remembering right. It's a 54-point over under with an even spread.
With an even
So
spread.
they are expecting a lot of points. Keenan Allen is a zone killer, and the Vikings ran a lot of zone this last week. And if they decide to switch to man, I do think that is where Mike Williams will put up some big numbers this next week. So I do got to agree. I have faith in our Vikings, Ty. I do, but I do think that it is going to be a high scoring game.
You had faith last week against the Eagles, and
if it wasn't for Butterfingers out there, I would have been right. So Vikings play better for like 85% of that game.
That's true. You can't win when you're turning the ball over at least 3 times a game.
Yeah, I was almost there. I give myself like a 75% credit for that. The wide receivers that I'm going to talk about is an ugly wide receiver room, but it is the Ravens, and they are taking on the Colts, who have given up just shy of 300 passing yards a game on just under a 70% completion rate. In week 1, it was Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. In week 2, it was Nico Collins and Tank Dell that did this defense in. So I think that you need to for sure be firing up Zay Flowers, who looks like the number 1 wide receiver. Obviously, Mark Andrews is there. He's the number 1 pass catcher. But I honestly think Odell, who's going to be healthy, could be a flex play in some deeper leagues this week. And I know it's kind of a grosser name. I'm not touching Rashad Bateman right now. Bateman's playing like a 30% snap share. I was wrong about that one. I had faith in him, and he has not panned out at all this year. Whereas Odell was playing when he was healthy. I think he played almost 100% of snaps the first game, if I'm right. Obviously, Mark Andrews was out that game, but he has played a lot. So I think that they're both going to get targets. I think that this Ravens team is still getting going. They're still figuring out the play calling. And even though they're 2-0, I still think that this offense is trying to figure it out. And so, yeah, I would for sure be firing up these Ravens wide receivers. Ty, do you have anything to add on that? Anything about these Ravens wide receivers? Do you disagree at all?
I think the interesting thing about the Ravens is that last week they really spread the ball around. Mm-hmm. Like Nelson Aguilar found the score. And that was after Odell left. So maybe that is the contingent is if Odell doesn't play, then we're going to see more Rashad Bateman, more Nelson Aguilar, more Devin Duvernay. But I think Zay Flowers is a fine flex. I would just say it's not a guarantee with Zay Flowers, because if they do spread the ball around, that negatively impacts Zay Flowers. So you can still start him, but just don't expect what we saw week 1. It's certainly a possibility, but it's not a guarantee.
For sure. Then, I would agree with that. And like I said, Odell's I think you fire him up in your flex in some real deeper leagues, right? If you're playing like a deep 12-man or even 14-man league, 2 flexes, then I'd probably start him up. But that is about it. Even though I do think it's a good matchup. Ty, who is your stream of the week? We actually both went with tight ends after trashing them last week, but we knew Lucas was going to miss, so we decided to try to do the position a little justice, and we both know it's going to bite us in the butt. So who is your stream of the week, Ty?
Yeah, I don't really know if this guy is a stream anymore, because he's performed pretty well through the first 2 weeks of the season, but I'm going to talk about Hunter Henry. And I know the Patriots got the Jets this weekend, and I think a lot of people will go, "Oh, it's the Jets. It's not going to go well." Sure. Yeah, I agree with that at the same time, but we also have to remember that the Jets quarterback is Zach Wilson. So this game is going to be close throughout, and it's a divisional matchup too. So it's going to stay close. No team is going to pull ahead. The Jets so far this year, though, they're allowing the 7th most fantasy points to the tight end position. And I know Jake Ferguson had the ugliest stat line so far this year. It was 3 catches, 10 yards, and a touchdown. So the fantasy points are inflated a little bit based on that. It's not an accurate representation, but they've got Hunter Henry now to deal with. And it's not one of those names where you're like Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, but Hunter Henry is very, very involved in this Patriots passing offense, to the point where I think we need to start having the conversation that Hunter Henry is either the first or second option in this passing game.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I would say it's between him and Ramondre Stevenson. And then it's like Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, and a combination depending on the opponent. Like Hunter Henry is a focal point for this passing attack. So far this year, he leads all tight ends in air yards, so he's getting targets downfield, which is great. And friend of the show, Hayden Winks of the Underdog Fantasy Football Show, check them out. Great stuff that they're doing over there. He tweets out fantasy usages by team, throughout the entire season. And it's in a nice organized bar graph where you can see, oh, wow, there's the first place and there's the team that doesn't use a certain position at all. I looked at his tight end fantasy usage chart. The Patriots are 6th. So they're top 10 in using their tight ends. And another way of saying this that, probably is going to sound more familiar. The tight ends for the Patriots are 6th in expected fantasy points based on usage. That's awesome. So Hunter Henry, super involved. I know you look at the Jets and you go, oh, that's not great. Trust this offense. Hunter Henry is a focal point. Trust it. If he's available, you're kind of struggling. You're like, I got David Njoku. I have Kyle Pitts. Who do I start? Do I start Pitts? Do I start Hunter Henry? I think you start Hunter Henry.
Yeah, I gotta agree this week, right? We said saying the Jets are an ugly matchup, and they are. But I think if anywhere you can find, a little bit of hope, it's at the tight end position. Because he's not going to be covered by Sauce the whole game. He is who's their second guy? DJ Reed is that there?
Yep, DJ Reed.
He's not going to be covered by DJ Reed. He's probably going to be the safety blanket when the defensive line starts closing in on Mac. So yeah, I would agree. Hunter Henry is definitely a guy that I'd plug in. But if we're looking for an actual stream of the week and not just a cop out like Ty just gave you, Adam Troutman versus the Dolphins. I guarantee he's on most of your waiver wires. The Dolphins are allowing 16.5 points per game to the tight end position and just gave up, I think, 17 fantasy points to Hunter Henry last game. Troutman did see 5 targets week 1, and he only did see 1 last week, but he played 82% of snaps, so he's out there. And he ran snaps on 29 to 38 routes and lined up in the slot actually 35% of the time. So he's being put into position to score. And then against a team that has struggled this year already against the tight end position, I think this is the perfect time to try and fire him up. If you got a guy like Kyle Pitts, who I definitely am not in love with right now, David Njoku, who hasn't performed necessarily, or just you are already streaming a tight end, I think in this plus matchup for Adam Troutman, I think that the usage is going to come through. And, just like any tight end, if he can give you 5 for 50, you're happy. But then he scores if he scores a touchdown on top of that, you're really happy. So that's what you're looking for in a tight end. Who's a guy who could get me 5 for 50, and who's a guy who has pretty decent touchdown upside. And for me this week, that is Adam Troutman.
It's kind of disgusting, but
it's gross.
You can't deny the facts.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't be happy doing it, but you definitely got to. All righty. Before we get to our worst matchups of the week, we're going to take a short break and hear from our friends over at Underdog.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
And went short on you on that one. And we're back.
I like it.
Nice and quick, little staccato. Ooh, some musical terminology.
Where did that come from?
Ty, I'm just dropping knowledge here. Just dropping knowledge today for the people. But yeah, we're back with our worst matchups of the week. And there were a lot more to choose from for our worst matchup. So Ty, I'm interested. What matchup did you decide to go with for the running back position.
I really don't like the Eagles running backs against the Buccaneers this week. And that feels weird because we just saw DeAndre Swift just completely dominate. So I will say that this argument is pretty dependent on Kenneth Gainwell's status, because if it is if he's out, then I think DeAndre Swift can be in your lineups. I know that Tampa is a tough run defense. They are allowing the second fewest rushing yards per game, and behind the one team that's allowing fewer rushing yards, which is the Eagles. So, again, if Kenneth Gainwell is out, then I kind of understand why you put DeAndre Swift in. But if Kenneth Gainwell is healthy, I have to see what the backfield is like. Knowing what DeAndre Swift just did against the Vikings, knowing what the Eagles think of Kenneth Gainwell, I need to see a week of how it's split and how it all plays out. If Kenneth Gainwell gets all the work again, that tells me everything I need to know. But if it's split, that also tells me something that I need to know moving forward. So again, the other part of this that is causing me to stumble when it comes to Eagles running backs is Nick Sirianni and his recent quotes about DeAndre Swift. It came out before Thursday Night Football where he said, talking about DeAndre Swift, he'll be in that role sometimes where he carries a load for the game, and he'll be in the role sometimes like he was in last game, which was against New England when he only had like 3 touches. We don't ever want to come out with him only having 2 touches. I misspoke. Sorry. It was 2 touches, not 3.
Mm-hmm.
But then just yesterday, Sirianni had another quote about DeAndre Swift where he said, DeAndre played awesome in that game. Sometimes he's going to be the focal point in the run game. Sometimes he's going to be the focal point in the pass game. I'm just excited to have his playmaking ability here with us. Nick, what the heck are these quotes supposed to mean? And part of me was like, well, what if he's trying to send a different signal and that he's actually going to be using DeAndre Swift? And I was like, I'm not going to play that guessing game. I don't want to call his bluff because it may cost me fantasy my matchups this week. So that's why I don't like the Eagles running backs. Again, I can understand if you want to start DeAndre Swift if Kenneth Gainwell is out, but if both are healthy, both should be on your bench just so you can see exactly how it's going to work out.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be said too, is even with DeAndre Swift, if it's just him, he's still playing the second best rush defense in the league right now, right? I mean, he's still got a tough matchup. He still has Jalen Hurts at quarterback, who probably won't be bottled up quite the same way in the rush game as he was. He's got a team that's going to throw the ball more because they have Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. I just think that we get so enamored sometimes with these weeks that these players have, but DeAndre Swift's not going to sniff 28 rushing attempts again for the remainder of the season. And when you think about the Eagles last year, they had Miles Sanders, and they didn't even try to re-sign him after 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns because they think that anybody can run behind this team. And you know what? Boston Scott and DeAndre Swift are both top 4 in yards before contact on rush attempts. They weren't even being touched till they were 4 yards down the field. So that's something to really consider. And that's where I think they're going to try and spell DeAndre Swift a little more because they do know he's their best back when he's healthy. But that's the key. They want him healthy for the playoffs because this isn't a team that's looking at the regular season. This is a team that's looking forward to the playoffs. So I think they're going to have more games where he's not quite the focal point like we hope he is. But yeah, I would agree. That is a very tough matchup this week. And my matchup is for a running back that I think you can just flat out sit, and that's the Texans running backs against the Jags. Dameon Pierce to begin with, I don't think he's a great start moving forward. He's only playing 45% of snaps right now in both games. He is not running super efficiently. This is not a team that's going to score a ton of touchdowns. CJ Stroud has looked good to move the ball, but they're not exactly scoring touchdowns at a high clip. And the Jags may not have played like a formidable rush attack yet, right? They played the Colts before they, got Zach Moss going, and then they played the Chiefs. So it's not like they've played formidable rush attacks, but they are holding opposing teams to 3.5 yards per carry on the season. They've only given up 166 rushing yards so far. Just for comparison, The Steelers have given up 200 more rushing yards in 2 games than the Jaguars have. And they have also given up the 3rd least amount of points to the running back position on the season. So I think with all of those combined, with knowing that the Texans are just not going to, feed Dameon Pierce the ball at the rate that we want him to, knowing that the Jags have been playing good against the run, and knowing that the Jags are at home and are probably going to look to jump out to a lead in this one, I just don't think Dameon Pierce gets the touches he would need for him to even be in your starting lineup. So for me, Dameon Pierce is a sit this week.
I like it.
All righty. Well, with that amazing commentary from Todd, we will move on to our wide receivers. Tyler, who are you talking about the wide receiver position this week?
I wish I could, keep the. I lost the words.
Banter.
It's been a day. Don't start Titans wide receivers against the Browns. Okay, and I know D-Hop is going to be a flex most weeks. I think you have to play DeAndre Hopkins if you don't have a good other option. But it's just going to be ugly. I mean, that Ryan Tannehill has to throw the ball to somebody, so it's going to be Hopkins. So you have that at least, but when you're going up against the Browns after their start to this season, I don't have much faith in DeAndre Hopkins even. Last week, if it wasn't for a busted coverage on a 71-yard touchdown score by George Pickens, the Browns would have allowed, if I'm not mistaken, what is 233 minus 82? Quick math says like 140 something. They're averaging 116 passing yards allowed in 2 games without that 71-yard score. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, what is that supposed to mean? Okay, so as things stand, because football happens and you can score a 71-yard touchdown, guess how many yards are still averaging then? 152.
Ugh, that's so gross.
It's disgusting. They shut down opposing quarterbacks. What do you think Ryan Tannehill is going to do against his defense?
Yeah.
It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. Okay, so avoid. I would write personally. If I was a DeAndre Hopkins manager, I would not play him this week. I would go find someone on a waiver. If you don't have anyone behind him, I would consider starting a running back at the flex and starting 2 wide receivers. This matchup is a disaster for Tennessee. This could very well be a Derrick Henry game because they don't want to risk Ryan Tannehill throwing against his defense. So I don't like this matchup for Titans wide receivers.
Yeah, my only pushback on the D-Hop thing is that we saw week 1 he could be just super hyper targeted, right? I mean, it still wasn't pretty for D-Hop. I think he had like 10 targets, but he only ended with like 60 yards. So
yep.
I think that could be, but I agree. There is no ceiling right now with DeAndre Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
You're not like, oh yeah, he could be putting up 20 points. He's not going to put up a 20-point week this week. So I would agree. I think, and I would not be probably touching Treylon Burks this week either. So, D-Hop's the only one you're questioning. And like you said, there are definitely better options out there. For me, I'm going to take the Bears wide receivers against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been holding teams to a completion percentage under 60%. They had held the Lions and Jaguars, two offenses that we were super excited about coming into this year, to a combined 30 points. They are holding teams to under 6 yards an attempt, which is top 10, and have only given up 220 passing yards a game. Right? These are supposed to be 2 really good passing attacks, 2 teams that are going to move the ball down the field, and they have been holding firm against them. And oh yeah, Justin Fields has struggled this year, especially throwing the ball. He has been getting, especially on now X, I guess you can call it. He has been getting trashed for just some of the reads that he didn't make, running into the line and just taking a sack. And now he faces Chris Jones, who has a full game under his belt, and I think could wreak a lot of havoc coming up the middle. So I would be very wary on DJ Moore. I'm not saying to sit DJ Moore, but obviously he's the only Bears wide receiver you're worried about. but guys like Trent McDuffie on that defense, they've been playing really well. And with the fact that, Justin Fields might be struggling all day long, and man, I just don't have a lot of faith right now in these Bears wide receivers against this defense, especially knowing that Steve Spagnuolo sends the blitz more than anybody in the entire league. I don't think that Justin Fields is going to have a good day. And so even though I personally like DJ Moore, the wide receiver, this is definitely not the week that I would be looking for him to put up good points moving forward.
No, I mean, based on everything that has happened this week for Chicago, they would be wise to go back to what they were doing last year and just letting Justin Fields run the ball like every single play. Like, that's what got them to be quote unquote successful, because they were 3-14. Like, it really wasn't successful, but the offense looked better when Justin Fields was doing read options, had designed runs, all that stuff. They should be doing that this week. And because of that impacts DJ Moore, that impacts Cole Kmet. So if you're going to see any kind of production from the Bears, it's Justin Fields on the ground.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I am at. I just am not looking forward to it. Obviously, DJ Moore is the kind of guy that could break one play for 80 yards and a touchdown. He does have that in the arsenal, but that is definitely not something I want to bank my week on. But yeah, that wraps up our worst matchups. So let's head into our build a parlay. I don't remember if Lucas transitions or I'm not going to, so we're just going to jump right into it.
We're just going to do it.
We don't want to waste your time anymore. Those 3 seconds are very valuable to you. So Ty, last week was a rough week for us. Fellas went 0 for 3, but we're going to redeem ourselves this week. We are going to absolutely redeem ourselves. So why don't you start us off with your, I would say this feels like almost a lock to you at this point for this week.
I talked about them in my best wide receiver matchups. I'm taking Keenan Allen at his line of 75.5 receiving yards, and I'm going, wait, he plays the Vikings, who played a ton of zone last week, who is a zone killer. Oh, Keenan Allen is. Wow, shocker. So Keenan Allen higher than 75.5 receiving yards to me is, I don't want to give a guarantee because that's how things just don't work. I'm going higher though. High scoring game. He's hit that mark in both games so far this year. So give me Keenan Allen higher.
Keenan Allen higher than 75.5 receiving yards. I was so worried. We don't have these labeled correctly, so I was just guessing how which one it was. I was really worried that it was going to be something crazy. But luckily, it was the right thing, so we did lock it in. I am taking Lamar Jackson higher than 219.5 passing yards.
Ooh.
That number last week. Now he's playing it against a team that's given up almost 300 yards a game. I brought the Ravens up as well in my best wide receivers matchup, and instead of trying to pick which one it's going to be, I'm just picking the guy that's going to throw him the ball. So I'm taking Lamar Jackson higher, and I think if his line continues to stay here, these are going to be some free lines, especially as this team tries to throw the ball more, which I think they're going to continue to do without a running game. So I'm going to lock it in. Lamar Jackson higher than 219.5 passing yards. Beautiful. All righty. Well, you heard it here first. Just 2 this week, but we're confident. We're going to right the ship. We're back on track. This is what you want to see. This is why you wait to the end, and we are giving you exactly what you need. Ty, before we hop off, is there anything that you want to say to the people ahead of week 3?
In the wise words of Confucius himself, of Aristotle, keep fighting the good fight.
Exactly. Keep fighting the good fight. Well, with that, make sure that you are subscribed to the pod, whether you're listening to the audio podcast or on YouTube. Make sure you have notifications on. Make sure you're following us, FFFellas on Twitter, the FFLs on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on TikTok and YouTube. I am Camlaw FFF, and he is Tyler_Plath. Thank you again for following along. We wish you the best of luck on your week 3 matchups. And with that, deuces.
Deuces.